Zaporizhzhia has made headlines. Where exactly is it situated and what really is the threat? Here through the graphics we are trying to make you understand the exact location. Here is the Zaporizhzhia plant and it is very near to these areas, the capital city of Kyiv, to the second largest city, which is Kharkiv, Mariupol and Kherson. Now this is the largest nuclear plant in Europe and the 10th largest in the world. Ukrainian authorities claim that it was due to the shelling, the continuous bombing by the Russian troops in this area in Zaporizhzhia that the fire broke out in one of the buildings outside the premise of the nuclear power plant, which has now been doused, which has now been extinguished. But these visuals have in fact come as a reminder, a grim reminder of what really happened in 1986 in Chernobyl, and how after that particular tragedy, after that particular incident, there were a lot of repercussions in terms of cancer cases increasing in children by more than 90%. According to a WHO report, more than 5,000 people died due to cancer post that tragedy. Let's open this up and go across to our guests to try and understand what really is happening. We have Major General GD Bakshi on the broadcast. We also have Professor R Rajaraman, Emeritus Professor JNU, Jitendra Nath Mishra, former Ambassador and Adjunct Professor and Distinguished Fellow at OP Jindal Global University. I first want to come to you, Major General GD Bakshi. Thankfully, that fire has been doused. We all know what happened in 1986 in Chernobyl. Ukrainian authorities alleging it is due to the shelling and bombing by Russian troops that this has happened. The president of Ukraine says it's time for Europe to wake up. If it does not, then there'll be no Ukraine, there'll be no Europe, if at all a tragedy happens in Zaporizhzhia.
Look, the simple fact of the matter is that the Russians, when this invasion started, the stated military objectives were the destruction of Ukrainian military potential, denazification, which is shorthand for regime change in Ukraine. So these are the two major objectives of the Russian special operation, as they call it, in Ukraine. As part of this, they have been targeting the nuclear facilities because the Russians have been saying that the Ukrainians have been trying to take away the fissile material like Iran and trying to make nuclear bombs out of it. So they are very keen to secure as much of Ukrainians' nuclear power potential as possible. Also, 25% of the electric power generation in Ukraine is through these power plants, especially the power plant at, if you give me a second, the power plants at Zaporizhzhia and at Androhadar. There are 6 950 megawatt nuclear reactors there in that complex, which was under attack. There was a fire there. Fire has been put out. Yes, there is a chance of accident if the artillery is indiscriminate, if they are not using this thing. But what I am seeing falling there is mostly flares. These are not missiles. These are flares, I think meant to light up that place, either for precision attack of the control headquarters, etc. and all. But they are definitely going for the nuclear plants. They are also definitely going for 6 biological warfare laboratories which were established in Ukraine with the help of the US Department of Defense, as also the DARPA, the Defense Advanced Project Research Agency. And they were, some of them were doing research in corona bat viruses. In one of them, they used the thermobaric weapon to burn up all those viruses if they are there. Because they feel they are being targeted, that Ukraine has made itself a bridgehead for destabilization, for doing harm and damage to Russia. It's extremely sad that the West, the United States, the NATO have egged on Ukraine to do harm and damage to Russia, poke it in the eye, and when the reaction has come, they have all dumped Ukraine. They are saying they will not put a single boot on the ground. Yes, they have imposed economic sanctions. If they impose economic sanctions of an order You know, they weaponize their financial institutions.
Right.
They weaponize the banking. They weaponize SWIFT. Then the Russians are saying that if you think we will just get destroyed economically and do nothing in return, we have nuclear weapons. They have held out nuclear threats.
General
So there
Bakshi,
is
stay on with us.
you know, we
before
must
I go across to Mr. Misra, as of now, the fighting in this area has stopped. There are reports suggesting there has been no damage to the equipment. The radiation levels are normal, but because the war is on, the shelling may continue. There are some concerns. What are those concerns? It's on your screens, viewers. The first big concern is that the fire, the shelling or the attack could reach the reactors. If that happens, the world already has seen what happened in 1986. So that's the biggest concern and fear. Concern number 2, cooling systems could have been disrupted. As of now, the reports suggest there's been no damage to the reactors, no damage to the equipment due to fire, but it still remains a big concern. Concern number 3, plant could see a nuclear meltdown. The latest that we are getting for you suggests that the radiation levels are normal. But if the shelling continues or if at all it hits the nuclear reactors, this is what could happen. Concern number 4, could have released large amount of radioactivity. So these are the concerns that are being shared by experts around the world. Nuclear experts are sharing these concerns. I want to go back to Mr. Misra. Mr. Misra, what is your assessment of what is happening on ground? Because the Ukrainian president is alleging that these tanks, the high-tech systems, vehicles that are being used by the Russians have thermal cameras, so they know what they're targeting. But the big question is, why would Russia want such a tragedy to happen when it has already witnessed the 1986 Chernobyl tragedy and, of course, the repercussions of that?
Well, I think, thank you very much for inviting me on the show. I think General Bakshi has answered that question, that they are trying to deploy or revive a nuclear weapon program, and it's about fissile materials. I cannot comment on what's happening on the ground because of the fog of war, but I can comment on the diplomatic and the strategic and political aspects. Why is Russia there? It's very simple. It's not about expansionism and imperialism so much as you're near abroad. And Russia is a great power, no doubt about it, a P5 member, just like the United States. It's of course less powerful. The economy is 1.7 trillion US dollars, like the state of Texas, much smaller economically, but still a power of great reckoning with very high technology and very strong military capability and a history of perceived, self-perceived greatness. Now, President Putin said famously, and only the people in the West quote only the first part. He said, well, we feel nostalgia for the Soviet Union, but to turn that nostalgia into something concrete and try to revive that would be madness. Now they only talk about this. I'll quote exactly. Whoever does not miss the Soviet Union has no heart. Whoever wants it back has no brain. Now you are only quoting the first sentence and not the second one. So there is a lot of hubris and a lot of sort of exaggerated sense of Russian invasion. Russia is going to take over Eastern Europe and that kind of thing, and the Baltic states will be the next target. I don't think that's the case. Russia has very specific objectives, as General Bakshi said, getting rid of the Nazism. So that means regime change definitely is on the cards. Occupation of territory, some parts of Donetsk and other parts, and of course Crimea, some parts of territory in the east to secure core Russian political, strategic and territorial interests. I don't think they want to take over Ukraine and the rest of the Baltic states and beyond. Now, why has this happened? It's very important to understand. I am no apologist for Russia because Russia has harmed India greatly in this crisis. So I'm no apologist whatsoever for Russia. But I try to understand, as a diplomat, why is Russia doing this? Now, in 2009, the West wanted Ukraine to become a member of NATO. So this has been going on and off. And now Ukraine has applied for membership of the European Union, and it hasn't been accepted, to the best of my knowledge, the other day. And what it means is that this is also a provocative step from Russia's. So you are really encroaching further and further into the Russian territorial heartland, very close to the borders. Now, would the United States accept? They didn't accept Russian Soviet missiles in Cuba. Period. And they will not accept this kind of intervention in a Latin American country. So it's not about imperialism, it's about great powers. It's about minimum security interests of the great powers. And you really have to have that kind of equilibrium and understanding. And I'm glad that Henry Kissinger, who is the realist, the famous realist in West, he has written that article in the Washington Post the other day. And there are many others, and Mashmir also, John Mashmir also, the realist theorist. And they have said very clearly that you have to respect Russian interests, minimum interests as perceived by them. They are not going to expand, but you're not doing that. And you have brazenly tried to expand into the east.
Right.
So this is the result. And this is, the war is the result of all that. But what the outcome will be, we'll never know, because wars can go out of control.
That's a very important point that you're making. I think the big question here is not when the war will end, but on whose terms and how. I want General Bakshi to come in. He wants to respond to the points that you were making. Go ahead, sir.
I tend to agree with the ambassador. The simple fact is that in the Bucharest conference in 2008, the NATO had outlined their desire to integrate Georgia and Ukraine into the NATO. And you know, in 2008, Russia had spelt out, these are our red lines, thus far and no further.
Right.
You know, when the Soviet Union collapsed, it broke up. James Baker, the then Foreign Secretary of the United States, had assured Gorbachev not 1 inch eastward expansion of NATO, 1 inch. From then on till now, they have taken 14 countries.
Right.
Now, please understand that Russia is steppes, flat land. It has been invaded twice, majorly, by Western Europe, and it has no leeway. It has to have buffer states.
Okay.
Therefore, it needs Ukraine. Therefore, it needs Georgia. They have spelt out their red lines, but people in the United States, NATO, thought that Russia has gone weak, so we can keep pushing. The simple fact is, in military power terms, technical military power, Russia has matched NATO and the United States. It is now confident that in its own backyard
Russia has matched NATO and the United States, says Major General GD Bakshi. Thank you very much, General Sahab. I'm pressed for time. Thank you very much, Mr. Mishra, as well, for joining us on the broadcast with your expert opinion. We're moving on now.